He spent 5 minutes sounding, to a lot of critics, like he could have been Nigel Farage. And the criticism is he actually sounded like Enoch Powell.
He is a pound shop Enoch Powell, and we got to watch him.
Keir Starmer, the leader of the United Kingdom, changes his mind more often than he changes his underpants, and he has to change them pretty regularly because it looks like he might be doing cocaine on the cocaine train, which any of you with any experience with the naughty white powder will know is a serious diuretic. If you're doing a serious rail and then trust yourself to fart, my word, you may get what I call the brown payback, a little alarm bell ringing at the back of the scrotum that lets you know you have made one holy error. Now, I'm 22 and a half years free and clean from all drugs, thanks to the grace of God and the 12-step programs that I diligently practice. And also, by the way, Keir Starmer, that, for all we know, that was AI, and I'm not suggesting that Keir Starmer takes cocaine or any of those things. I'm just trying to have a little bit of fun. Now, what I will tell you, though, is this dude, man, when he was asked about, like, whether or not, what's a woman, like 6 months ago.
So a woman can have a penis?
Look, I don't think we can conduct this debate with,
Sorry, have I offended you in some?
No, it's just...
A woman, anyone who says that they're a woman is a woman. Well, come on then, Keir, what do you mean by that? This dude struggles to commit to an opinion, whether it's matters of political consequence, like what's your perspective on this war? What's your perspective on this tax? Should old people have to pay these fuel bills? What do you think about migration? He changes all the time. Now, people are seeing it as very significant that he's changed his position on migration in the UK with a speech that we covered yesterday where he said, we've become a nation of strangers.
We risk becoming an island of strangers.
An island of strangers. This is extraordinary rhetoric, contrasted even with what he said around the time that the Southport 3 little girls were murdered by a first-generation migrant, where he said that the people that were protesting were racists and far right and they would be brought to justice.
Individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow.
He's a really interesting protein and amorphous politician, not in a good way. He's one, I believe, of that class of politicians that simply say whatever they need to say in order to succeed. Let's have a look at Keir Starmer being compared to the sort of ground zero of this type of rhetoric in the UK, Enoch Powell. I want you to watch this for a moment. Hear me out and humour me, guys. This is Enoch Powell, a British politician of the 1970s into 80s, who was being primed to be the leader of the Conservative Party. And whether you like him or not, the reason he didn't become the leader was probably he was a bit too aggressive, overt and honest. I personally found a lot of Enoch Powell's rhetoric pretty disturbing because he was making these claims at around the time of Windrush, where the people that were migrating to the UK were from nations that had fought alongside British troops in the Second World War and had come to the UK in search of a better life. Many people that come from Ghana, come from the West Indies, come from African regions and India, came to the UK not in order to sign up and be on welfare, but to work and to become nurses and doctors and contribute to a culture in the best possible melting pot way. Years later, what has migration become? Many people become it's a way of destabilizing domestic populations. You'll all be familiar with replacement theory. These are ideas that you'll know more about than I do. So Enoch Powell's famous speech was that there will be rivers of blood, that the black man, this is his words, will have the whip hand over the white man, like who was the Roman historian? I can't remember. They were seeing the river Tiber foaming with much blood. That was his famous speech, and it generated a lot of tension. Now watch this. This is the kind of intelligent discourse that I pray will return. I pray will return. Jonathan Miller is an educated university class liberal. Enoch Powell is a conservative. Both these men probably literally speak Greek and Latin. These are educated people. Probably the best equivalent you might be able to reach for in your American culture is when Gore Vidal and William Buckley debated politics around the sort of the Nixon election, was it? This is the kind of thing we need to return to. We can't moronically flap our gums forevermore in hot and vibrant conflict. We need to return to intelligent conversation. Let's watch these two men arguing, and then we'll use this to analyse why the world has become the way that it has, empty, hollow politicians like Keir Starmer, and of course, a return to populist characters like Trump. Let's look at it.
Nobody seriously imagines that if 2/5 of Birmingham consists of a first generation of descendants born here, of people from the West Indies, from Africa and from Asia, there will not be a profound difference between that part of the population and the rest?
I think there may be a difference. In fact, there certainly will be a difference. Whether that difference is enough to promote anxiety, unless someone declares...
You think nobody would notice?
No, I think they'll notice, certainly. The question about is whether they will notice with fear and horror, unless someone announces to them that fear and horror are an appropriate response to such a fact.
I see. And you think that human nature is such that unless somebody referred to this, nobody would notice that their own native cities were transformed, that the white population was moving out and a different population was moving in?
I didn't say that.
Well, you think then that it would be noticed, but that it would not merely be tolerated, but would be taken as a desirable or acceptable development?
No, I didn't say that either.
Well, that is what you have to say. That is what you have to say. If this is not to be a problem.
No. You're simply putting words which you would find convenient in my mouth. What I said was...
Both of these men are supremely intelligent, and I enjoy their manner of discourse. Jonathan Miller clearly refutes strongly Enoch Powell's position that migration is ultimately negative and terrifying and that Britain will lose its cultural identity. Enoch Powell was a serious patriot and a monarchist and everything that one might imagine of a man of his generation and education. What I'm enjoying about the conversation is that it's intelligent and reflective, and that Enoch Powell is being forced to articulate his position more clearly because Jonathan Miller is not hollow or shallow. He's trying to convey a compassionate perspective, and Enoch Powell is trying to convey a conservative perspective. We've not yet resorted to mudslinging, attacks on a person's character. It's very, very interesting to me. 1775, baby. How do you stay alive? You've used 1775. A dark roast so bold it could bench press James Madison. A medium roast smoother than Julian Assange escaping on a skateboard. An anti-aging blend loaded with CA-AKG, a compound scientifically shown to reduce your biological age. And of course, you get some exclusive merch. Look at this matte black tumbler stamped with unapologetic freedom quotes. A gold spoon clip. Oh yeah, Macron and Keir Starmer. We're on the Coke train again, baby. Look at this spoon clip. It keeps your beans sealed tighter than Epstein's list or Zelensky's a-hole when Putin's on a Coke binge. This is not corporate coffee. This is single origin, small batch, mold-free, toxin-free, roasted fresh, not by robots in a diversity-funded focus group, but by people who own cast iron and opinions. Every batch scores 85 plus on the cupping scale. That means it's good, real good. Not roasted over the dying hum of a Cybertruck that ran out of battery halfway through a freedom ride. Go to 7075coffee.com/brand and get yourself a starter kit before the Ministry of Caffeine Regulation finds out.
I didn't say that there would be no difficulties. Difficulties are in the nature of human coexistence. What I said was that the differences that there would be are not necessarily the differences which would excite fear and horror unless someone stands up and says that fear and horror are an appropriate response. Someone invested with the authority of public office. When you do that, the charisma of your office and the charisma of your role as a politician will often convince people that fear and horror are an appropriate response if that is what is being told to them. It's what philosophers call a performative utterance. No doubt you're familiar with it. And social cooperation is a hard and a difficult thing. I feel that you would have done your duty as a politician, as an ethical politician, much more productively if instead of exciting the notion of future strife, you had encouraged the notion of future cooperation on the basis of understanding.
Note that they cut Enoch Powell's response, so you have to sort of pay attention to everything that's going on when you're trying to scrutinise something like this. But you get a general idea that there is a liberal, compassionate and human response to the problem of migration that Miller is trying to articulate. The problem with Keir Starmer having the position that he's now adopted on the subject of migration is that he's a political inheritor of the liberal left. He's the leader of the Labour Party. So it's like a Democrat politician suddenly saying, I'm changing my view on migration. And people that are genuinely concerned about migration will say, oh, he doesn't really believe it anyway. He doesn't have the interests of the British people at heart. He's a globalist, imperialist, WEF-style politician that ultimately is invested in the managed decline of nations like the UK and the United States of America in order that global agencies and bodies can step in and reap the rewards of a falling civilization. That seems to be sort of part of the perspective. Now, here he is being compared to Enoch Powell on a British daytime show, a little like The View or Regis and Kathy.
He spent 5 minutes sounding to a lot of critics like he could have been Nigel Farage. And the criticism is he actually sounded like Enoch Powell. So I repeat the question, which is, did you know about this Island of Strangers line? And is it one that you agree with and would use?
Well, I think what you heard the Prime Minister say at the beginning of the clip that you played was to talk about the diverse nation, and he celebrated that.
Cooper, I'm sorry, at the beginning, for 5 minutes of his speech, from the beginning of his speech for 5 minutes, he did not talk about the benefits of immigration. And then he used this phrase, Island of Strangers. So I repeat the question for the third time. Is it a phrase you knew about, that you recognise and that you would use?
No, but I think that's the problem. The immediate phrase that he said immediately before it was to talk about the diverse nation. And then he said, yeah, immigration needs to be controlled and managed. And I think there's a real challenge.
We risk becoming an island of strangers.
These are members of his cabinet sort of defending him. This is Starmer himself in Parliament.
The situation is serious. The last government lost control of the borders. We are taking powers. The Borders Bill, precisely to his point, the Borders Bill is the first bill to give terrorism-like powers to law enforcement, precisely so that we can get in before the crimes are committed, before people get to this country. That's right. This is the most far-reaching provision ever for law enforcement to defend and secure our borders. And that's why it is extraordinary that he, of all people, voted against it. And sooner or later he's going to explain it.
This political debate is occurring as a result of the rise of Nigel Farage and reform in the UK as a meaningful political threat, which is itself as a result of the rise of populist nativist politics across the world, notably and primarily in the United States of America. Many years ago, I was on a debate show called Question Time with Nigel Farage, and on that, I somewhat memorably coined and executed the phrase, "You're a pound shop, Enoch Powell." Pound shop's a bit like saying Timo, I guess, is what you lot have over here. That's like an online version, isn't it? But you know, like dollar stores. I goes, "You're a pound shop, Enoch Powell." It was pretty funny. It was a pretty slick lyric. And also, by the way, at that point, I was being sort of like really pushed into various political positions. And the British establishment in particular are observant as to when there could be some kind of populist uprising that's antithetical to their interests, and are very quick to reclaim that space. Probably that's true in your country as well. And I, for a minute, was the middle of something that got kind of popular. There was actual big protests. Like 10,000 people marched to Downing Street for this housing thing that I was involved in. I was supporting this campaign, and I elevated and amplified an existing housing campaign, and I think made it more successful, I would say. So around this time, I was invited on TV a lot. I was moving out of being like what you might call a normal anodyne commodity celebrity into a slightly more volatile celebrity, though still at that point, probably aspects of my perspective were useful. Not to mention the fact that because I've not been university educated or even fully high school educated, they could get me on TV shows and like corner me and say, "Well, what about this? Don't you know about this law?" And I go, "I don't really, mate. I went to a normal school. I was taking drugs when you lot were at university."
Look, if you fly into Gatwick, you'll see lots of green spaces. That is certainly true. However, if you have a country in which the population goes up as a direct result of immigration, what you find is not a shortage of green fields, if that's where you wanted to build houses. You find a shortage of primary school places. You find a shortage of GP surgeries. You know, we have fewer GPs per head than any other country in Europe today. You find congestion, whether it's on the roads or the London Underground or wherever you go. And what you find is that actually you're constantly playing catch up, and really the general quality of life for the massive population has gone down. So I think those comments today were wholly irresponsible. And what we've seen, I mean, it's quite interesting to think that, you know, in 1990...
Look at me, weird as fuck on the TV as always. That's not a normal way to sit, is it? I'm so like loaded with adrenaline and cortisol all the time. I'm well into recovery. It's not that long ago. Look at me, that's not a normal way to behave.
See, the population of this country was 55 million. It is now between 62 and 63 million. That is a massive, massive increase. And I think ordinary folk going about their lives are feeling it. And I think, having a proper immigration policy, controlling the numbers, doing what nearly 200 countries in the world do, namely controlling the numbers that come and the type of people that come, is the answer.
Right. Russell Brand.
I sometimes feel worried about you, Nigel Farage. But the reason I feel worried is because I know a lot of people are frightened in our country. I know a lot of people are feeling afraid and frustrated. And there is a sense that there is a corrupt group in our country using our resources, taking away our jobs, taking away our housing, not paying taxes, exploiting us. And there is an economic elite that this man's party is funded by, that this man comes from background working in the city. Let me tell you something. There was an economic crash and a lot of money was lost. His mates in the city farted. Nigel Farage is pointing at immigrants and the disabled and holding his nose. Immigrants are not causing the economic problems and suffering we experience. As much as any of us, I enjoy seeing Nigel Farage in a boozer with a pint and a fag, laughing off his latest scandals about breastfeeding or whatever. I enjoy it. But this man is not a cartoon character. He ain't Del Boy. He ain't Arthur Daly. He is a pound shop Enoch Powell, and we got to watch him.
At that point, I was at odds and loggerheads with Nigel Farage. Listening to him now, I can hear his point about services and access to amenities. But I would still like to layer in these important points. It is global commercial and corporate power that most diminishes the ability of ordinary people across the world to live fulfilling and economically appropriate lives. Migration does not help when it's at the scale that it is now in some European countries and maybe even in your country. The problem we get when focusing solely on migration is it becomes dehumanizing, and it certainly isn't loving. Many people will have recourse to the now popularly used adage, put your own mask on first. You can't save the world if you can't save yourselves. But then I immediately pivot to this point. What are your reference when it comes to deciding who has authority and what our vision for society is? We live in a time of competing visions. We've always lived in a time of competing visions. The problem is now that the speed has exponentially increased to the point where all of us live in a blur of everybody else's cacophonous vision, a synthesia of noise and sound and mad colour, of continual uncertainty. In this place, only two types of leaders will survive. One, the authentic, if somewhat demagogic populists, as best exemplified perhaps like never before by Donald Trump, whose authenticity, easy rhetoric can perhaps make up for some of the ways that he belongs to an age, I would say, economically, that might have passed. Then you have these bureaucratic managerial types like Keir Starmer, who, like his forebears, and that includes people from both political parties, David Cameron, Tony Blair, will simply say what needs to be said in order to maintain power. Whatever you think about Trump, can you imagine him prevaricating or going, actually now, I don't agree that we should build a wall? Like, yeah, I shouldn't have said that. There should never have been a wall. And if he did, he would sort of say it like that, wouldn't he? And you'd go, look, I did say build a wall, but now I'm against walls because of this reason. There's a kind of some sort of earnest reliability at his core. Keir Starmer, whether you're asking him whether a woman is a woman or whether a migrant, is a person that I feel might not be deeply rooted in principles. But that might just be because of my own biases and prejudices. I'm generally disposed to thinking of right-wing nationalism now, to be interested in free speech, protection of personal values. I'm still kind of concerned when I think about like treating migrants in a way that is unfair and unjust. I also obviously acknowledge that if you have a country, you've got to have borders. And if you have a country, you've got to have a vision. If you have a country, you've got to have leaders. But perhaps what we are actually at now is the point where it's systems themselves that need to alter. This is, by the way, precisely what I was saying under the decline of Democrat leadership and globalism and neoliberalism. And now that we have a different political landscape entirely as a result of Trump, the MAGA movement, and the kind of boldness of the people that were sort of sticking up for him in opposition to an incredible tidal onslaught of condemnation. I think what we have is a landscape now where we have to recognize that in order for the lives of ordinary people to improve, the systems themselves have to adapt and change. Maybe your constitution is robust enough to enshrine, espouse, and even house those ideas, i.e., maximum independence in each state, each town, each street, each house, and each heart. But maybe it isn't. But that's just what I think. I want to know what you think in the comments and chat.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.